Tech mogul Olivia Sinclair stunned Silicon Valley's elite circles when she sent her rebellious son Ethan to work on her childhood friend's remote mountain farm after he deliberately crashed the company servers during a $400 million product launch. No smartphone, no luxury car, and nowhere to hide from the consequences of his actions. What began as punishment would transform not only Ethan's entitled worldview, but also heal family wounds that wealth and ambition had only masked. And his unexpected discovery in the old barn would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Ethan Sinclair's Italian sports car screeched to a halt in the executive parking lot of Sinclair Innovations, the tech giant his mother had built from nothing into a global powerhouse. The security guard barely had time to recognize the CEO's son before Ethan was striding through the lobby, designer sunglasses hiding the effects of last night's party, and a coffee that cost more than most people's hourly wage clutched in his hand. At 26, Ethan had perfected the art of being fashionably late. His mother's executive assistant, Walter, who had worked for Olivia Sinclair for nearly 20 years, was waiting by the private elevator with poorly concealed disapproval. "She's been waiting for 40 minutes, Walter said, his professional smile strained. "Traffic," Ethan replied dismissively, though his driver had already informed Walter that Mr. Sinclair had insisted on stopping at his favorite specialty coffee shop despite already running late. "Is she on the warpath?" Ethan asked, sipping his coffee. "Your mother is concerned." Walter chose his words carefully. "The Artemis launch is in less than 3 hours. The elevator whisked him to the top floor where Sinclair Innovations occupied, a sleek building that embodied the cutting-edge technology they produced. The company's most ambitious project to date, the Artemis virtual assistant system, was set to launch globally that afternoon, after 3 years of development and hundreds of millions in investment. Olivia Sinclair stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, her commanding silhouette framed against the San Francisco skyline. At 58, she maintained the intensity and focus that had allowed her to build a tech empire as a single mother in a male-dominated industry. Her silver-streaked dark hair was cut in a precise bob, and her tailored suit spoke of understated power. "You're late," she said without turning around. Ethan dropped into one of the ergonomic chairs, stretching his long legs out in front of him. "Bay Area traffic is brutal. Who schedules meetings at 9 anyway?" When Olivia turned to face her son, her piercing grey eyes revealed nothing. She placed a tablet before him without comment. "What's this?" Ethan asked, not bothering to look down. The Artemis system experienced a critical failure during final testing last night. Someone with high-level access credentials made unauthorized changes to the core algorithm. Ethan's practiced nonchalance faltered slightly. "And you think that has something to do with me?" "The access logs show your credentials, Ethan. At 2:17 a.m., precisely when you were supposedly at the Horizon Club, according to your social media posts." "You're monitoring my accounts now?" Ethan's voice rose in indignation. "When our company's future is at stake, I monitor everything," Olivia replied, her voice dangerously quiet. The changes were deliberate, targeting specific functions that would have caused catastrophic failure during the launch demonstration. Ethan shrugged, recovering his composure. "Okay, so maybe I made some adjustments. The team should know what happens when they scrap a project without consulting the person who conceived it. You're referring to the Nexus gaming platform that failed every security audit and would have exposed our users to significant privacy risks? A platform that it could have revolutionized how people experience virtual reality. You didn't even give it a chance." Olivia's expression hardened. The platform had fundamental flaws that our security team deemed unfixable without a complete redesign. We're a company built on user trust, not just flashy features. You mean you're a company built on what you decide matters? Ethan shot back, his casual facade cracking to reveal the anger beneath. Just like you've always decided what matters for everyone around you. The decision was made by the executive team based on technical assessments, not personal preference, Olivia replied, her tone measured but firm. Your response was to attempt sabotage of our most important product launch in 5 years. Well, your precious team caught it in time, didn't they? No harm done. 300 people have worked around the clock to fix the damage you caused. The market is watching this launch, Ethan. Thousands of jobs depend on its success, not to mention the millions of users who rely on our systems. For a brief moment, genuine surprise crossed Ethan's face. He hadn't considered that real people might be affected by his actions, but vulnerability didn't come naturally to him. Defensiveness did. Well, maybe if you'd ever bothered to include me in actual business decisions instead of treating me like the company mascot, I'd understand these things better. You parade me at events when you need the family image, but shut me out when it comes to having any real input. Olivia studied her son, his outward confidence, and the insecurity she knew lurked beneath. Somewhere inside this entitled stranger was the curious boy who had once followed her around the early Sinclair offices, asking endless questions about how computers worked. The boy who'd lost his father at 10, and with him the one person who had kept both Ethan and Olivia grounded in what truly mattered. When was the last time you earned anything, Ethan? She asked quietly. Truly earned it through effort and merit? Not because of your name or my money? The question hung in the air between them. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. Olivia reached for her phone. Walter, bring in the Oak Ridge file. To Ethan, she said, I've made a decision. It's time you learned about consequence, value, and what it actually means to build something worthwhile. Walter entered with a slim folder, which Olivia opened deliberately. You remember my old friend, Sarah Thornfield? The hippie farmer lady? The one who sends those weird homemade preserves at Christmas? Sarah and I grew up together in rural Oregon before I left for college. She took over her family's struggling farm and transformed it into one of the most successful, sustainable agricultural operations in the Pacific Northwest, without shortcuts, without exploitation. Fascinating history lesson, Ethan drawled. Is there a point? Sarah has agreed to take you on at Oak Ridge Farm for the next 3 months. Ethan blinked, then laughed. You're joking. 3 months, Ethan. No credit cards, no access to your trust fund, no special treatment. You'll work like any other farm employee. Live in the same staff housing, earn the same wage. His laughter died instantly. This is insane. I'm not some teenager you can ground. No, you're an adult who just tried to sabotage a company where thousands of people work because you wanted to throw a tantrum. An adult who needs to learn that actions have consequences. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I won't do it, Ethan declared, standing abruptly. You can't force me. You're right, Olivia agreed. I can't force you, but I can ensure that your current lifestyle ends immediately. The penthouse apartment, the car, collection, the credit cards, the trust fund, all contingent on my goodwill. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a choice. 3 months at Oak Ridge Farm, or find out how far your social media influence really goes in paying San Francisco rent. Ethan stared at his mother in disbelief, searching for any sign of bluff or uncertainty. He found none. This is about more than punishment, Olivia said, her tone softening slightly. It's about giving you what I never did, the chance to discover your own capabilities separate from wealth and the Sinclair name. By sending me to shovel manure, By sending you somewhere your Instagram following and last name mean nothing, where only your character and work ethic matter. Olivia closed the folder. The private jet leaves tomorrow morning at 7. Pack practical clothing. You won't be attending tech galas in rural Oregon. As Ethan stormed toward the elevator, fury and disbelief warring within him, he had no way of knowing that his mother's dramatic decision would set in motion changes neither of them could have predicted, changes that would ultimately heal wounds that money and success had only managed to conceal. Back in his luxury penthouse apartment, Ethan paced furiously, dictating instructions to his personal assistant, Jamie, who struggled to keep up with the chaotic demands. "This is ridiculous," Ethan fumed, flinging open his closet doors to reveal rows of designer clothes, organized by color and season. "She thinks she can break me by playing Oregon Trail." "Perhaps some practical items would be advisable," Jamie suggested cautiously, adding several items to the growing online shopping cart on his tablet. "According to my research, farm work requires specific types of clothing and footwear." "Fine. Order whatever you think I'll need. I'll go to this stupid farm, take some rustic selfies for my followers, and be back in the city before the end of the month." His phone chimed with another message from his best friend Derek, expressing disbelief at what Ethan had dubbed agrarian prison. Ethan had already received dozens of texts from his social circle since word had spread about Olivia's decision. Half were performative sympathy, the other half barely concealed schadenfreude. "This is a PR nightmare," Ethan muttered, scrolling through social media. "Tech heir exiled to grow potatoes. I'll be a laughingstock." "Or," Jamie suggested carefully, "you could shape the narrative. Privileged heir embraces sustainable agriculture, has a certain appeal, very zeitgeisty." Ethan paused, considering this angle. "That's not terrible. We could position it as a conscious choice, a statement about environmental responsibility and digital detox." He grabbed his phone, already composing the perfect caption in his mind, when a sharp knock interrupted his thoughts. Walter entered carrying a small box. "Your mother asked me to deliver this," he said, his professional demeanor firmly in place despite the clothing hurricane surrounding him. Ethan took the box warily. Inside was a basic flip phone, not even a smartphone, and a note in his mother's precise handwriting. "For emergencies only. No social media, no shopping apps, no distractions. The point is to disconnect." "You can't be serious," Ethan breathed, looking up at Walter in horror. "No real phone for 3 months. 3 months is nothing," Walter replied, his tone softening slightly. "When I was your age, I worked on fishing boats in Alaska for years, with no communication except radio." "Well, I'm not you," Ethan retorted, dropping the basic phone back in its box as if it might contaminate him. "And I'm not doing this." Walter studied him with unexpected compassion. "Your mother didn't tell me to say this, but she's not doing this to punish you, Ethan. She's genuinely worried about the path you're on." "Worried about her company image, you mean?" "Worried about her son," Walter corrected. "I've known Olivia for 20 years. I've seen how she looks at those old photos of you as a child. The science fair projects, the computer games you used to code together." "Ancient history," Ethan dismissed, though something in his expression flickered. "Perhaps, but I think she believes that boy is still in there somewhere." Walter moved toward the door, pausing briefly. "The car will be here at 6 tomorrow morning. I'd suggest packing clothes you don't mind getting dirty." After Walter left, Ethan sank onto his bed, suddenly exhausted. The confidence that had fueled his righteous anger was beginning to crack, revealing something uncomfortable beneath, the faintest inkling that perhaps he had gone too far this time. He glanced at the photo on his nightstand, one of the few he kept displayed. In it, a 10-year-old Ethan stood between his parents at the opening of the first Sinclair Innovations headquarters. His father, James, tall and smiling, had his hand on Ethan's shoulder. Olivia looked younger, more relaxed, her arm linked with her husband's. 2 months after that photo was taken, James Sinclair died suddenly of a heart attack. Olivia had thrown herself into building the company, and Ethan had gradually transformed from the curious, creative child in the photo to the entitled heir he barely recognized in himself. With a sudden impulsive gesture, Ethan swept the contents of his open suitcase onto the floor. "Jamie," he called, a new determination in his voice. "Yes, Mr. Sinclair." "Find out what people actually wear to farm." The Sinclair private jet touched down at a small regional airport in Oregon shortly after 8 a.m. the following morning. Ethan, who had deliberately stayed out until 2 a.m. at an exclusive club opening, nursed both a hangover and his wounded pride behind designer sunglasses. As the plane taxied to a stop, he peered out the window, half expecting to see his mother, waiting, perhaps having reconsidered this absurd punishment. Instead, a weathered pickup truck sat on the tarmac, so old and mud-splattered that its original color was a matter of speculation. Olivia, seated across from her son, closed her laptop. It was the first direct attention she'd paid him during the flight, having spent the journey on business calls and emails. "We've arrived," she said unnecessarily. "That rust bucket is our ride," Ethan asked incredulously. "It looks like a tetanus infection on wheels." "That rust bucket belongs to Sarah's son, Jack. He'll be your supervisor at the farm." Olivia stood, straightening her impeccable suit. "I have meetings in Portland this afternoon, so I won't be staying." "You're just dropping me off?" Ethan couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. Despite everything, some part of him had expected his mother to at least ease the transition, perhaps tour the farm, ensure the accommodations were acceptable. "You're 26, Ethan, not 16, she replied. "Besides, this journey is yours to make, not mine." As the cabin door opened, crisp Oregon air rushed in, startlingly fresh compared to San Francisco's urban blend. Ethan reluctantly followed, his mother down the stairs, his brand-new hiking boots, purchased by Jamie from an outdoor equipment store, feeling stiff and foreign on his feet. A tall man in his early 30s leaned against the truck, arms crossed over a flannel shirt that had seen better days. His dark hair was carelessly pushed back, and a short beard covered a strong jawline. Unlike the deferential service staff Ethan was accustomed to, he made no move to approach them, instead waiting for them to reach him. "Olivia," he greeted, straightening to shake her hand with genuine warmth. "Been too long." "Jack," she replied with a nod. "You've grown up since I saw you last. 10 years will do that." Jack's gaze shifted to Ethan, assessing him without bothering to hide his skepticism. "So this is your son. Ethan, this is Jack Thornfield. He manages Oak Ridge Farm's operations." Ethan extended his hand reflexively, the social graces drilled into him since childhood taking over. "Charmed, I'm sure." Jack's handshake was brief and firm. "We'll see about that." The awkward moment was interrupted by the pilot, who had begun unloading Ethan's luggage, 2 expensive suitcases that, despite Jamie's hasty shopping, still contained more designer items than practical ones, plus 2 additional bags with last-minute essentials. Jack raised an eyebrow at the mountain of luggage. "Planning to stay for a year?" 3 months in the wilderness requires preparation," Ethan replied defensively. "We are a working farm, not a wilderness retreat," Jack corrected, already loading the bags into the truck bed with considerably less care than Ethan would have preferred. "And you'll be too busy to need outfit changes." Olivia checked her watch. "I should get going if I'm going to make my meetings." She turned to Ethan, and for a moment he thought she might hug him. Instead, she placed a hand briefly on his shoulder. "Remember why you're here, Ethan. This isn't just about consequences, it's about opportunity." "Right," he muttered, "the opportunity to get tetanus from rusty farm equipment." If Olivia heard, she chose to ignore the comment. With a final nod to Jack and a take care of him, she reboarded the plane, leaving Ethan standing beside the weathered truck, already feeling abandoned. "Ready?" Jack asked, opening the passenger door. The hinges creaked ominously. Ethan looked back at the jet where his mother had already disappeared inside, then at the truck with its ripped seat upholstery and lingering scent of earth and something unidentifiable. "Do I have a choice?" he asked, more to himself than to Jack. "Always," Jack replied unexpectedly, his expression serious. "That's the one thing Mom taught us all. There's always a choice. It's the consequences that vary." The simple wisdom of this statement, delivered without pretension, momentarily disarmed Ethan. He slid into the passenger seat without further complaint, though he couldn't resist adding, "I'm surprised this thing even starts." "This thing has been running for 25 years, Jack said as he turned the key, bringing the engine to life with a roar that suggested both power and the need for muffler attention. Some things are built to last, even if they don't look pretty anymore. As they pulled away from the airstrip, Ethan watched the jet grow smaller in the side mirror, taking with it his last connection to the life he knew. Ahead lay nothing but uncertainty and the vague shape of mountains in the distance, indifferent to his discomfort and the disruption that had thrust him into this unfamiliar world. What he couldn't possibly know was that the real disruption had only just begun. The truck rumbled down a winding country road, each pothole making Ethan wince as his body jostled against the worn seat. The landscape outside his window was distressingly pastoral, rolling hills, scattered farmhouses, and endless trees displaying the vibrant colors of early autumn. No skyscrapers, no upscale restaurants, no crowds of people hustling between appointments and social engagements. "So," Jack said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since leaving the airstrip, "did Olivia explain what you'll actually be doing at the farm?" "Manual labor as punishment," Ethan replied, scrolling through his smartphone out of habit before remembering it wouldn't connect to any network out here. "Shoveling manure, picking vegetables, living like a peasant to teach me humility or whatever." Jack's mouth twitched. "That's one interpretation. Is there another?" "Oak Ridge Farm isn't some hobby operation, Ethan. We're one of the most successful sustainable farms in the Pacific Northwest. 30 full-time employees, seasonal workers during harvest, educational programs for local schools, research partnerships with agricultural universities." Ethan glanced at him, surprised by the pride evident in Jack's voice. "And you run all this?" "Co-manage with my mother," Jack corrected. "She handles the business side and community partnerships. I oversee the actual growing operations. My sister Emma manages our value-added products division and direct marketing." "A regular family enterprise," Ethan remarked, unable to keep the condescension from his tone. "How quaint." Jack's grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "We supply organic produce and specialty items to restaurants across the Pacific Northwest, including 5 with Michelin stars in San Francisco." "Ever eaten at Lumiere?" Ethan blinked in surprise. Lumiere was among the most exclusive restaurants in the city, with a 6-month waiting list. "I've been to the chef's table," he said, a reflexive status marker. "Then you've eaten our heritage, tomatoes and specialty greens. We also developed the unique grain blend they use in their signature bread." Jack turned onto a gravel road, a wooden sign announcing Oak Ridge Farm, Estend 1892, marking the entrance. "Whatever you're expecting, Ethan, this isn't it." As the truck crested a hill, Oak Ridge Farm came into view, and Ethan felt his preconceptions begin to crumble. Instead of the dilapidated operation he'd imagined, he saw a sprawling farm with modern greenhouses, well-maintained buildings, and orderly fields stretching toward distant woods. Workers moved purposefully between areas, some driving small tractors, others tending to plants with practiced precision. "Not exactly green acres, is it?" Jack asked, noting Ethan's expression. "It's larger than I expected," Ethan admitted. Grudgingly, they pulled up beside a weathered but well-maintained farmhouse, 2 stories of classic Pacific Northwest architecture with a wide porch and green shutters. A woman in her early 60s emerged, wiping her hands on an apron, her silver-streaked, hair pulled back in a practical bun. "That's my mother, Sarah," Jack said as he parked. "Fair warning, she doesn't suffer fools, but she's got the biggest heart in Oregon. Don't let her intimidate you." "I negotiate deals with Fortune 500 CEOs and global tech leaders," Ethan replied, haughtily. "I don't get intimidated by farm wives." Jack's expression hardened. "She has a PhD in sustainable agriculture and turned down a position at Cornell to expand this farm's research division. Maybe save the assumptions." Before Ethan could respond, Sarah Thornfield approached, her shrewd eyes taking in every detail of their visitor. "So you're Olivia's son," she said without preamble. "You have your father's eyes." The unexpected mention of his father momentarily threw Ethan off balance. "You knew my father?" "James and I met when he came to Oregon, with Olivia during college break. Brilliant mind, genuine heart, he could see the potential in things others dismissed." And Sarah's expression softened slightly. "He would have been an extraordinary person at any wealth level. Money didn't define him the way it defines so many." A lump formed unexpectedly in Ethan's throat. Few people mentioned his father's character or intellect. Most remembered him only as Olivia Sinclair's husband, who died tragically young. "Come inside," Sarah continued, already turning toward the house. "We need to go over how things work here before you get settled." The farmhouse. Interior was surprisingly bright and spacious, with a blend of traditional elements and modern updates. Large windows overlooked the fields. The kitchen featured high-end appliances alongside vintage furniture, and bookshelves lined most walls, filled with volumes on agriculture, ecology, and business. Sarah led them to what appeared to be a home office, where maps of the farm property and agricultural charts covered one wall. "Oak Ridge operates on a simple principle," she began, gesturing for Ethan to sit. "Everything is connected. The work we do, the way we treat the land, the people we employ, the community we serve, it's all part of the same system." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, uncertain how to respond to her directness. "You'll start tomorrow at 5:30 a.m. with the morning crew," Sarah continued. "Jack will show you where to report. You'll rotate through different areas of the farm over the next few weeks to learn basic operations. Once you've demonstrated competence in the fundamentals, we'll assign you more specific responsibilities." 5:30 in the morning, Ethan echoed, horrified. "That's when I usually go to bed." "Then tonight will be an early night," Sarah said with a hint of amusement. "The crops don't wait for fashionable hours to need tending." As if on cue, a young woman appeared in the doorway, mid-20s, with her mother's sharp features softened by her father's warm eyes, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore work boots, jeans, and an Oak Ridge Farm t-shirt, yet carried herself with unmistakable confidence. "Emma," Sarah introduced, "this is Ethan Sinclair, Olivia's son. He'll be joining us for the next 3 months." Emma's assessing gaze reminded Ethan uncomfortably of Jack's. "The worker housing is ready. I've put him in cabin 4. The casual way they discussed his placement, as if he were a shipment of produce to be stored properly, made Ethan's cheeks a burn. "I can hear you, you know," he snapped. "I'm standing right here." Emma smiled, not unkindly. "Oh, I know. Just not sure you've been listening." She gestured toward the door. "Your luggage is already there. Coming?" With a last glance at Sarah and Jack, their expressions unreadable mixtures of challenge and something that might have been compassion, Ethan followed Emma out of the farmhouse and into his new reality. The Thornfield family had orchestrated this intervention with the precision of a military operation, he realized. From the moment his mother had announced his farm sentence, gears had been turning here in Oregon, preparing the ground not just for his arrival, but for whatever transformation they all seemed to expect. As they walked toward a cluster of small cabins at the edge of the property, Ethan felt a strange combination of resentment and something else, a reluctant curiosity about these people who lived such different lives, yet spoke with such certainty of purpose. The intervention had begun, and despite his determination to resist it, Ethan couldn't entirely suppress a whisper of something unexpected inside him, the faintest glimmer of wondering what he might discover about himself in this alien world, and what secrets the old barn might hold. This is it. Ethan stood in the doorway of Cabin 4, surveying the space with undisguised dismay. The cabin was clean and well-maintained, but shockingly basic. A small main room with a twin bed, desk and bookshelf, a tiny bathroom with a shower stall, and a kitchenette barely large enough for a mini fridge and two-burner stove. Standard worker housing, Emma confirmed, setting down one of Ethan's suitcases. The seasonal employees love these cabins. Most farm worker accommodations are far more crowded. Ethan ran a finger along the simple pine dresser. My walk-in closet at home is bigger than this entire place. Good thing you won't need many outfit changes then. Emma's tone remained neutral, but Ethan detected a hint of challenge beneath the surface. The dresser and closet should be enough for work clothes. And this is where I'm supposed to live for 3 months. Ethan gestured at the sparse surroundings. Where's the TV? The internet? There's a common room in the main building with satellite TV and internet access. Workers can use it during off hours. Emma handed him a small item, a simple key on an Oak Ridge Farm keychain. We encourage people to spend their evenings outside when weather permits. The pond behind the cabins is particularly peaceful for reflection. Ethan pocketed the key absently, still processing the reality of his accommodations. The bed looked nothing like his custom memory foam mattress with Egyptian cotton sheets. The bathroom had none of his essential products. The entire cabin lacked anything that spoke of comfort or luxury. I can't live like this, he stated flatly. Emma's expression remained impassive. You'd be surprised what people can adapt to when they have no choice. She moved toward the door. Dinner's at 6 in the dining hall. Work assignments are posted on the bulletin board there. Yours will be listed under training rotation. Breakfast starts at 5 for the morning crew. Wait, Ethan called as Emma reached the door. That's it? No orientation, no training manual, no, I don't know, farm welcome basket? Emma turned back, a hint of amusement finally breaking through her professional demeanor. Welcome to the real world, Ethan. It doesn't come with an instruction booklet. Her expression softened marginally. Look, I know this is a shock to your system. Everyone knows who you are. Olivia Sinclair's son, tech party boy, Instagram influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers. We've all seen the tabloid photos. Ethan felt his face flush with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. But none of that matters here, Emma continued. Tomorrow you're just another pair of hands learning to work. How difficult that transition is depends entirely on you. She hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, my mother doesn't take on projects. She doesn't believe in. If Sarah Thornfield thinks you have potential, there's something there worth finding. With that cryptic assessment, Emma left, the screen door closing with a soft snap behind her. Alone in the silent cabin, Ethan felt the first genuine wave of panic since his mother's pronouncement. This was real. Yes. He was actually expected to live in this bare-bones cabin, wake before dawn, and perform manual labor for the next 3 months. The magnitude of what he had lost, his luxury apartment, his social standing, his carefully curated lifestyle, hit him with physical force. He sank onto the edge of the bed, which creaked under his weight, and pulled out his useless smartphone. The screen reflected his face, designer stubble still perfectly trimmed, but eyes wide with something approaching fear. On impulse, he switched to the basic flip phone his mother had provided, finding a signal where his smartphone had none. His finger hovered over the keypad. One call to his mother, and he could end this. He could accept whatever financial penalties she imposed. He could find an apartment, not his penthouse perhaps, but something comfortable. He could get a job. Surely someone would hire Olivia Sinclair's son, if only for the publicity value. He could escape. But as he began to dial, another thought intruded, the disappointment in his mother's eyes when she discovered his sabotage of the launch, the genuine respect in Jack's voice when he spoke of creating something meaningful, the way Sarah had mentioned his father's character, a side of James Sinclair that had been overshadowed by his role as a tech mogul's husband. With a frustrated growl, Ethan tossed the phone onto the bed. He wasn't ready to surrender yet. Olivia expected him to fail, to come crawling back to San Francisco within days, humbled and desperate for his former lifestyle. Well, he wouldn't give her the satisfaction. He would stay, not because he believed in this ridiculous intervention, but to prove that Ethan Sinclair wasn't so easily broken. With renewed determination, he unzipped his suitcases and began the process of organizing his belongings in the limited space. His designer clothes looked absurdly out of place, hanging in the simple closet. His collection of expensive grooming products barely fit on the tiny bathroom shelf. His tech gadgets, the few he'd brought despite Jamie's warnings, seemed almost offensive against the cabin's rustic simplicity. As he unpacked, Ethan tried to imagine how he would describe this experience to his friends back in San Francisco. Rustic charm, he would call it, getting back to basics, perhaps even research for a sustainability initiative. He would turn this exile into a narrative he controlled, an adventure, not a punishment. By 5:45, he had arranged the cabin as best he could, creating a semblance of comfort with the few familiar items he had packed. He changed into what he considered casual attire, designer jeans that cost more than a week's salary for most Oak Ridge employees, a simple button-down shirt, and the least impractical boots he had brought. Following a crude map Emma had left, Ethan made his way to the dining hall, a large timber-framed building near the center of the property. As he approached, the sounds of conversation and laughter spilled out through open windows. He hesitated at the entrance, suddenly aware that he was about to face a room full of strangers, people who worked with their hands, who had likely grown up in places like this, who might already know exactly who he was and why he had been sent here. For someone accustomed to making entrances at exclusive tech launches and charity events, this modest dining hall suddenly seemed far more intimidating. Drawing himself up to his full height and arranging his features into a mask of confident indifference, an expression he had perfected over years of navigating Silicon Valley's social scene, Ethan pushed open the door. The conversation didn't stop dramatically as he entered, but it definitely dimmed. Approximately 30 people were scattered around long wooden tables, men and women of various ages, all with the weathered look of people who worked outdoors. Some wore Oak Ridge farm shirts, others casual clothes clearly chosen for comfort, rather than style. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, hyper-aware of the eyes turning toward him. He had never felt more out of place in his life. "Ethan." Sarah's voice broke the awkward moment as she approached from a serving area. "Perfect. And timing. Come, I'll introduce you. Before Ethan could protest, Sarah had guided him to the center of the room. "Everyone, this is Ethan Sinclair. He'll be joining our training rotation for the next few months." Ethan expected whispers, sidelong glances, perhaps even open hostility. Instead, he received nods of acknowledgement, a few welcoming smiles. And then, most surprising of all, a return to normal conversation as people went back to their meals and discussions. "That's it?" he whispered to Sarah. "No questions about why I'm here, no judgment." Sarah's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Do you want to be treated as a spectacle?" "No, but then don't expect to be one." Sarah steered him toward the food line. "Everyone here has their own story, their own reason for being at Oak Ridge Farm. Some are working through personal challenges. Others are pursuing agricultural degrees. Many are immigrants building new lives. Your presence isn't as extraordinary as you might think." The simple meal consisted of hearty stew, fresh bread and salad, all produced on the farm, Sarah explained with pride. As Ethan reluctantly filled his plate, he noticed Jack and Emma sitting with a group of workers at a distant table, deep in discussion over what appeared to be field diagrams. "You won't be joining your family?" Ethan asked, as Sarah led him to a table where several younger workers sat. "The best way to learn about a place is from the people who do the everyday work," Sarah replied. "Jack and I have a standing dinner meeting with our section managers on Mondays. You'll get plenty of family time soon enough." She introduced Ethan to the table's occupants: Lily, a university student interning in the research division; Marco, who managed the greenhouse operation; and Devon, an agricultural science graduate working in soil management. All were in their 20s or early 30s, all clearly intelligent and engaged with their work. "Ethan will be starting in Field Team 2 tomorrow," Sarah informed them. "Perhaps you can give him some first-day advice." With that, Sarah departed, leaving Ethan to navigate this social situation without the buffer of wealth, status, or even familiar conversational topics. "So," Lily said after an awkward pause, "first time on a farm. Is it that obvious?" Ethan asked dryly, looking down at his unsuitable clothing. The table laughed, but not unkindly. "The boots," Marco explained. "They're pretty, but you'll destroy them by lunchtime tomorrow." "The boots cost $600, Ethan couldn't help informing him. "Then you'll destroy $600 by lunchtime," Devon amended with a grin. "The mud doesn't care about the price tag." To Ethan's surprise, the conversation flowed more easily than he'd expected. These people were nothing like his San Francisco circle. They asked different questions, valued different experiences, laughed at different jokes, but they were welcoming in their own way, offering practical advice about which work gloves prevented blisters and which breakfast options provided the most energy for morning field work. As dinner concluded, Ethan found himself walking back to his cabin alongside Devon, who occupied a neighboring cabin. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan ventured. "Do they all know why I'm here, that this is basically a punishment from my mother?" Devon considered the question. "Some probably do. News travels, but it doesn't really matter." "Why not?" "Everyone's first few weeks are tough, regardless of why they came. You'll be judged on what you do, not why you're doing it." They reached Ethan's cabin, now looking even smaller and more austere in the fading evening light. Devon seemed to sense his trepidation. "First night's the hardest," he offered sympathetically. "It gets better." "Does it?" Ethan couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. "The work or the accommodations?" "Both," Devon replied with a wry smile. "The work, yes, once your body adjusts. The cabin, you'll stop noticing it when you're tired enough." He glanced at his watch. 5:30 comes early. You should try to sleep." Left alone again, Ethan entered his cabin, the reality of his situation settling over him like a physical weight. He was here. The departure from his familiar world was complete. There would be no elegant exits, no summoning a car service when a boredom struck, no escaping to the next party. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan Sinclair had truly left his comfort zone. Not for an exotic vacation or a carefully curated adventure, but for a genuinely alien experience he had no script for navigating. As he prepared for bed, setting the alarm for an unthinkable 4:45 a.m., Ethan found himself wondering if he would even recognize the person who emerged from this place 3 months from now. The thought was equally terrifying and, in some strange corner of his mind he wasn't ready to acknowledge, intriguing. Sleep came surprisingly quickly, his body surrendering to the emotional exhaustion of the day. His last conscious thought was that tomorrow, his first real day at Oak Ridge Farm, would reveal whether he was as fragile as his mother believed, or whether there might be something more resilient beneath the polished exterior he had spent a lifetime perfecting. The shrill beep of Ethan's alarm jerked him from a deep sleep, momentarily disorienting him. The unfamiliar ceiling, the absence of city sounds, the firm mattress beneath him. For a few seconds, he couldn't remember where he was. Then reality crashed back. Oak Ridge Farm, Oregon, farm exile. 4:45 a.m., he groaned, checking the time. In San Francisco, he'd rarely seen this hour except from the other side, returning from a night out, not beginning a workday. The cabin was chilly, the autumn Oregon morning seeping through the simple walls. Ethan wrapped a blanket around his shoulders as he stumbled to the small bathroom where his reflection in the mirror shocked him. Without his usual elaborate grooming routine, his face looked younger, more vulnerable. His hair, usually styled to perfection, was flat on one side and wildly tousled on the other. "Get it together, Sinclair," he muttered to his reflection. "It's just a farm. How hard can it be?" Ethan showered quickly, the water pressure disappointingly weak compared to his rainfall shower at home. He dressed in what he considered appropriate work attire, the least expensive jeans he owned, still bearing a designer label, a dark sweater that wouldn't show dirt easily, and the boots that Marco had warned would be destroyed by noon. Outside, the world was still dark, the sky a tapestry of fading stars as the first hint of dawn lightened the eastern horizon. Lights blazed from the dining hall and various farm buildings. To his surprise, the property was already active, workers moving purposefully between structures, the distant sound of equipment starting up, voices calling greetings in the pre-dawn stillness. Inside the dining hall, Ethan found a hearty breakfast buffet of eggs, oatmeal, fresh bread, fruit, and coffee. Workers filled their plates efficiently, many eating while reviewing notes or discussing the day ahead. The atmosphere was focused, but not tense. These people knew exactly what they were doing and what was expected of them. Ethan hesitated at the food line, suddenly aware that he had no idea what to choose. How much energy would he need for whatever tasks awaited him? What would sustain him through a morning of whatever farm people did in the mornings? "First, day jitters?" a voice asked beside him. Ethan turned to find Lily adding eggs to her plate. "Go for protein and carbs," she advised. "You'll need the energy." "Thanks," Ethan murmured, following her advice and adding a generous portion of scrambled eggs to his plate. "Is it always this busy at this ungodly hour?" Lily laughed. "This is nothing. Wait until harvest season. We're up at 4 then." As they found seats, Ethan noticed a large whiteboard near the entrance, covered with names and assignments in neat columns. His own name was listed under Field Team 2 Training with a note, "Report to Miguel at West Fields, 5:30 a.m. "Who's Miguel?" he asked Lily between bites of surprisingly good eggs. "Field Team Supervisor. Tough but fair. He won't go easy on you for being a beginner, but he won't expect the impossible either." Lily checked her watch. "You should finish up. West Fields are a 10-minute walk, and Miguel is strictly punctual." Following Lily's directions, Ethan made his way through the property as the sky gradually lightened. The scale of Oak Ridge Farm impressed him despite himself. Orderly fields stretched in all directions, some with rows of vegetables at various growth stages, others covered with crops he couldn't identify. Greenhouses glowed with interior lights, and a large modern barn housed equipment that looked far more sophisticated than the tractors he'd imagined. At the West Fields, a group of about 8 workers had already gathered. They wore work clothes, gloves, and Oak Ridge farm caps or bandanas. A stocky man with weathered skin and salt and pepper hair stood before them, checking a tablet. Miguel. Ethan approached hesitantly. The supervisor looked up, assessing him with a swift glance that seemed to catalogue everything from his impractical boots to his uncertain expression. "Ethan Sinclair," Miguel said. "Right on time. Ever planted anything before?" "I had a succulent in my apartment once," Ethan offered. "It died within a week." Someone in the group chuckled. Miguel didn't smile, but something like amusement flickered in his eyes. "Today you'll be helping with the last of the fall harvest. In this section," he informed Ethan, "Anna will train you." He nodded toward a muscular woman in her 40s with sun-weathered skin and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Follow me," Anna said, already moving toward a nearby equipment shed. "We'll get you geared up first." Geared up turned out to mean thick. Gloves that made Ethan's hands look enormous, knee pads for working close to the ground, and a wide-brimmed hat to shield him from the sun that was just beginning to rise. "These will ruin my outfit," Ethan protested weakly. Anna's laugh was short and dry. "Honey, this field will ruin your outfit no matter what you wear. The gear just keeps you from ruining your body along with it." The equipment shed was organized with military precision, tools hanging in designated spots, supplies neatly stacked and labeled. Anna demonstrated the harvesting process efficiently, how to identify ripe vegetables, the proper technique for cutting stems without damaging the plant, and how to handle the produce to prevent bruising. "Each crop gets handled differently," Anna explained. "The market produce needs to look perfect, so we take extra care. The processing crops can have some cosmetic damage, but we still handle them with respect." To Ethan's surprise, the demonstration was far more technical than he'd expected, with Anna explaining plant biology, ripeness indicators, and market quality standards with the expertise of someone who clearly understood agricultural science on a professional level. "You know a lot about this," Ethan remarked as they carried harvest bins to the field. "BS in plant science, minor in agricultural business," Anna replied matter-of-factly. "Most of us here have some formal education in addition to practical experience. Sarah doesn't hire people who just wing it with her crops." Outside, the team had already begun harvesting, moving methodically down long rows of plants. Each person took a section, kneeling or crouching to select and cut vegetables with practiced efficiency. Ethan was assigned a short row to start, Anna explained, and shown exactly what to look for in terms of ripeness and quality. What appeared simple in demonstration proved frustratingly difficult in practice. Ethan's manicured hands, even protected by gloves, felt clumsy as he tried to maneuver among the plants without crushing them. The vegetables seemed determined to either hide from him or break when he tried to harvest them. His first few attempts resulted in damaged produce that Anna quietly set aside for composting. "Gentler," Anna advised. "Think of them as living things that someone is going to eat, not objects to be conquered." "They're just vegetables," Ethan muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead with his forearm, already feeling the strain in his back and thighs from the unaccustomed crouching position. "Living things that feed people," Anna repeated firmly. "That deserve care and respect for the nourishment they provide." By the time the sun had fully risen, Ethan had completed barely half of his assigned row, while the experienced workers had finished multiple sections. His lower back ached, his knees hurt despite the pads, and his fingernails had dirt embedded beneath them, even with the gloves. The pristine sweater now bore streaks of soil, and his designer jeans had grass stains at the knees. Water break, Miguel called, and the team straightened gratefully, stretching cramped muscles as they moved to a water station set up at the edge of the field. Ethan stood shakily, his legs numb from the unfamiliar position. He stumbled slightly, catching himself on a nearby post. "First day's the hardest," offered a young man beside him, handing him a paper cup of water. "I'm Raphael, been here 3 seasons. "Does it get easier?" Ethan asked, too tired to maintain his usual aloof demeanor. "The body adjusts," Raphael replied with a shrug, "and you learn to move more efficiently. Wasted motion is what kills you out here." After the brief break, they returned to the field. Ethan eyed his unfinished row with something approaching despair. What had seemed like a simple, even menial task that morning now loomed as an almost insurmountable challenge. "Need some tips?" Raphael asked, noticing Ethan's expression. "I need a miracle," Ethan replied, "or a robot to do this for me." "Actually, they're developing harvesting robots," Raphael said with unexpected seriousness, "but they can't match human judgment yet. For deciding ripeness, the technology is fascinating but limited." "You sound knowledgeable for a field worker," Ethan said, immediately regretting how condescending it sounded. If Raphael took offense, he didn't show it. "Mechanical engineering student at Oregon State, working here part-time to pay tuition. Most of us have lives beyond these fields, you know." Ethan felt heat rise in his cheeks that had nothing to do with the strengthening sun. Once again, his assumptions about the people here had been wrong. Raphael showed him a more comfortable way to position his body while harvesting and a technique for handling the vegetables that resulted in fewer casualties. With his guidance, Ethan's pace improved slightly, though he remained far slower than the experienced workers. By mid-morning, when Miguel called for lunch break, Ethan had finished his row, the shortest by far, but complete nonetheless. He stood, his body protesting every movement, and surveyed his work. The harvest bins were filled with vegetables that looked remarkably like the ones Anna had shown him as examples of proper quality, not perfect, but acceptable. He had created something, or at least helped gather living things that would become food for real people. It was a small accomplishment, practically microscopic compared to the tech innovations he'd been involved with in San Francisco. Yet it provided a strange, unfamiliar satisfaction. "Not bad for a first attempt," Miguel commented, inspecting Ethan's bins. "Your selection improved toward the end. You've got a good eye for ripeness once you started paying attention." From Miguel, Ethan had already learned this constituted high praise. He found himself absurdly pleased by the simple acknowledgement of his progress. The afternoon brought new tasks: washing and sorting the harvested produce, learning to operate the irrigation system, and helping to prepare another field for late-season planting. Each job introduced new muscles that Ethan didn't know he possessed. Until they began to ache, new skills his manicured hands struggled to master, and new knowledge about plants, soil, and weather that he'd never had reason to acquire in his urban existence. By 5 when the day shift ended, Ethan was more exhausted than he'd ever been in his life. His body hurt in places he couldn't name. His hands were developing blisters despite the gloves, and his once-styled hair hung in sweaty strands around his dirt-streaked face. "You survived," Lily commented as they trudged back toward the residential area. "First day complete." "Barely," Ethan admitted. "Is it always this physical?" "Different tasks require different kinds of effort, but yes, farm work is fundamentally physical. That's part of what makes it rewarding. You can see and feel what you've accomplished." As they approached the cabins, Jack emerged from one of the equipment buildings, checking something on a clipboard. He glanced up, nodding to Lily, before his gaze settled on Ethan's bedraggled appearance. "Westfield team?" he asked, his expression unreadable. "Full day?" "All day," Ethan confirmed, too tired for his usual sarcasm. "Harvesting is demanding work. Good place to start. Jack studied Ethan's face. You look terrible. Thank you for noticing, Ethan replied dryly. Present, Jack corrected unexpectedly. Yesterday you looked like someone who was already planning his escape. Today you look like someone who's actually here. The observation was uncomfortably perceptive. Ethan had indeed spent most of his first day fully immersed in the immediate challenges, too busy figuring out how to identify ripe vegetables without destroying them to plot elaborate revenge scenarios or dream of San Francisco. The shower. In your cabin has a massage setting, Jack added, already turning away. Turn the handle all the way to the left. It helps with muscle soreness. This unexpected bit of practical kindness caught Ethan off guard. Thanks, he called after Jack, but he was already walking away. Attention returned to his clipboard. In his cabin, Ethan peeled off his filthy clothes, noting with a mixture of dismay and strange pride the dirt, plant material, and unidentified stains that covered them. His once expensive boots were indeed ruined, caked with mud and scratched beyond repair. The shower's promised massage setting provided blessed relief to his aching muscles. As hot water sluiced away the physical evidence of his labor, Ethan found his mind drifting not to San Francisco or his mother or the unfairness of his situation, but to the vegetables he had harvested. Would they end up in a high-end restaurant, a local grocery store, someone's family dinner table? Had he selected them correctly, handled them properly? The thought brought an unexpected parallel to his own situation. Like those vegetables, he had been uprooted from his familiar environment and placed somewhere new and challenging. His survival, like their quality, would depend on his ability to adapt, to thrive despite the disruption. Now you're thinking like a farmer, he muttered to himself, shaking his head at the fanciful comparison. Next, you'll be talking to the plants. Yet, as he collapsed into bed that night, exhaustion pulling him towards sleep despite the early hour, Ethan found himself wondering what his assigned task would be tomorrow and whether the vegetables he'd harvested would look good on someone's plate, his small, imperfect contribution to the complex living system that was Oak Ridge Farm. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a nagging curiosity about the old barn he'd seen at the north end of the property, the one building no one had mentioned or shown him yet. By the end of his first week at Oak Ridge Farm, Ethan had developed a new relationship with time. In San Francisco, time was something to be managed, scheduled, and often killed. Endless brunches, tech meetups, and social events arranged to fill the hours between waking and sleeping. Here, time was a relentless taskmaster, each day a grueling marathon from pre-dawn to dusk, each hour filled with physical demands that left no room for boredom. His body, once toned by exclusive fitness classes and personal training sessions, now ached in entirely new ways. Muscles he hadn't known existed screamed in protest each morning. His hands, formerly soft and manicured, were developing calluses, and constantly bore embedded dirt he couldn't seem to fully remove, no matter how vigorously he scrubbed. His designer wardrobe remained largely untouched in his suitcases. He'd quickly learned the necessity of practical clothing, reluctantly accepting Raphael's loan of proper work gear until he could order his own. Friday evening found Ethan sitting on his cabin's tiny porch, nursing a cup of herbal tea and examining his blistered palms. He had spent the day in what the staff called rotation training, moving from one area of the farm to another, harvesting in the morning, washing and packing produce midday, and helping repair irrigation lines in the afternoon. Each task had introduced new challenges, new skills to fumble through, new opportunities to demonstrate his incompetence. "Those will toughen up," a voice observed. Ethan looked up to find Jack standing at the edge of his porch, holding a small paper bag. He quickly closed his hands, embarrassed by their raw state. "Are you here to check on your investment?" Ethan asked, summoning a shadow of his usual sarcasm, despite his exhaustion. Making sure the city boy hasn't collapsed from actual work? Actually, Jack replied, unaffected by his tone, I brought you these. He offered the bag. Inside, Ethan found balm for his blisters, heavy-duty hand cream, and athletic tape. For tomorrow, Jack explained, you can tape the worst spots before they become open wounds. The unexpected kindness caught Ethan off guard. Thanks, he managed, uncertain how to respond to assistance that came without apparent judgment or condescension. Jack remained where he was, hands in his pockets, studying Ethan with that same unreadable expression he'd noticed during their first meeting. How's it going? Honestly. Ethan considered deflecting, then sighed. I'm terrible at everything. I'm too slow, too weak, and too ignorant about the most basic aspects of all this. He gestured toward the fields. I spent an hour today trying to fix a section of irrigation pipe that Raphael repaired in 10 minutes. Did you eventually fix it? Yes. Then you weren't terrible, just inexperienced. Jack leaned against the porch railing. Everyone starts somewhere, Ethan. No one's born knowing how to repair irrigation systems or harvest crops. Your mother probably was, Ethan muttered. That drew a genuine laugh from Jack. My mother grew up in Portland, just like you grew up in a city. She was an environmental science professor before she married my father and fell in love with both him and this place. This revelation startled Ethan. Sarah wasn't always a farmer. Thornfield was my father's name. This farm belonged to his family for generations. Mom was a city academic who came to rural Oregon for research, met David Thornfield, and never looked back. Jack's expression softened with affection. She had to learn everything from scratch, just like you're doing now. The parallel was too obvious to ignore. So, according to this little parable, I'm supposed to fall in love with a farmer and give up my urban existence. Is that the moral of the story? The moral, Jack replied evenly, is that transformation is possible, but it's never easy, and it always involves struggle. He straightened, preparing to leave. Use the balm before you sleep. It'll help with the healing. As he walked away, Ethan called after him, Why are you being nice to me? I thought you were supposed to make this experience as difficult as possible. Jack turned back. The work is difficult enough on its own. My job isn't to break you, Ethan. It's to make sure you have a fair chance to discover what you're actually capable of. His words lingered long after he disappeared into the gathering darkness. The weekend brought no reprieve from labor, though. The tasks shifted to maintenance projects and preparation for the coming week. Saturday morning found Ethan in the equipment barn with a small team, cleaning and organizing tools, a task that seemed simple until he realized he couldn't identify half the implements or their purposes. That's a dibber, explained Louisa, an older worker with a patient demeanor, as Ethan held up a pointed wooden tool with confusion. For making holes in the soil at a consistent depth. And that, she added, nodding to a curved metal instrument, is a hori-hori knife. Japanese design, good for weeding, dividing plants, measuring depth. There's so much equipment, Ethan marveled, surveying the vast array of specialized tools. I thought farming was just, I don't know, throwing seeds in dirt and waiting. Louisa laughed, a warm, rolling sound. Modern agriculture is highly technical, especially organic farming, where we can't rely on chemical shortcuts. Each tool has a specific purpose, designed through centuries of innovation. By lunchtime, Ethan's head was spinning with new terminology and knowledge. His body still ached, but he found a strange satisfaction in organizing the tool wall, each implement hanging in its proper place, ready for use. It was a small accomplishment, but tangible, something he could see and touch, unlike the abstract achievements of his former life. Sunday's assignment brought a new challenge, the farm's educational program. Oak Ridge Farm ran weekend workshops for local families, teaching sustainable gardening practices and connecting people with the source of their food. Ethan was assigned to assist Emma with a children's group learning about seed starting. "I don't know anything about seed starting," Ethan protested when he saw the schedule, "and I'm not good with kids." "Perfect opportunity to learn both then," Emma replied briskly, handing him a laminated instruction sheet. "Just follow my lead, and remember, enthusiasm counts more than expertise with 7-year-olds. To Ethan's surprise, the workshop was actually enjoyable. The children's natural curiosity and lack of pretense were refreshing after a lifetime navigating social circles where every interaction was layered with calculation and judgment. When he confessed to the group that he was learning alongside them, one small boy with thick glasses patted his arm sympathetically and said, "That's okay, I'll help you." By the end of the session, Ethan had helped each child plant their own container garden, learned about germination times and soil composition, and received a slightly sticky handmade thank you card from his young helper. As the families departed, Emma gave him an approving nod. Not bad for someone who's not good with kids. Ethan tucked the card into his pocket. "They're less judgmental than adults." "Most people are less judgmental than you think," Emma replied. "We're usually too concerned with our own struggles to focus much on others' failures." The observation hit uncomfortably close to home. Ethan had spent most of his life hyper-aware of others' judgment, carefully curating his appearance, speech, and associations to meet expectations he'd never questioned. Here, covered in potting soil and wearing borrowed work clothes, he'd somehow felt more authentic with a group of children than at any San Francisco tech gala. The second week at Oak Ridge Farm brought escalating challenges. Ethan was moved from basic tasks to more complex operations, helping with greenhouse management, assisting in the packing facility where produce was prepared for market, and joining harvest teams, where speed and accuracy were equally important. Each new assignment revealed fresh inadequacies. His city-trained mind struggled with the practical problem-solving required in agricultural work. His body, though gradually strengthening, still limited his effectiveness. Worst of all was the growing awareness of how much knowledge he lacked, not just about farming, but about the natural world in general. "What do you mean you can't tell the difference?" Anna asked incredulously when Ethan confused similar-looking herbs during harvesting. "That's clearly oregano, not thyme. Look at the leaf structure, the aroma, feel the texture." "They're both green herbs," Ethan defended weakly. "So are poison hemlock and parsley, but I wouldn't recommend mixing those up either," Anna retorted, though her tone held more exasperation than malice. "You need to start paying attention to details." Wednesday brought rain. Not the gentle showers Ethan was accustomed to in the city, but a relentless downpour that transformed the farm into a muddy obstacle course. To his dismay, work continued regardless of weather, with the team now wearing rain gear and boots as they fought to protect sensitive crops and prevent erosion on sloped fields. By mid-afternoon, Ethan was soaked despite his borrowed rain jacket, his hands numb with cold as he helped secure row covers against the driving wind. Misery overwhelmed him, bringing unexpected tears that mingled with the raindrops on his face. "I can't do this," he muttered, fumbling with a corner of fabric that kept tearing free in the wind. "I'm not cut out for this kind of life." "Neither was I at first," Raphael said beside him, efficiently securing his section. "But humans adapt. We're good at that." "Some humans may be," Ethan replied bitterly. "I've been here almost 2 weeks and I'm still the worst worker on every team." "You're comparing your Chapter 1 to everyone else's Chapter 20, Raphael observed, moving to help with Ethan's struggling section. "That's not fair to yourself." By evening, when the rain finally subsided, Ethan had reached a crisis point. Exhausted, chilled, and deeply discouraged, he trudged back to his cabin, each step a deliberate act of will. Once inside, he stripped off his muddy outer layers and stood under the hot shower until the water began to cool, trying to thaw the cold that seemed to have penetrated his very bones. wrapped in every layer of clothing he could find. Ethan sat on his bed and pulled out the emergency flip phone. One call to his mother and this ordeal could end. He could admit defeat, accept whatever financial penalties resulted, and return to a world where rain was something you watched through windows, not something you worked in until your fingers turned blue. He stared at the phone, thumb hovering over the keypad, imagining the conversation. What would he say? I tried, but it was too hard. I'm not strong enough. I don't belong in this world. The stark truth was that he didn't belong, not in this place of physical labor and practical skills. He belonged in San Francisco, in the world of technological innovation and digital economies he understood. Yet, the thought of returning as a failure, of confirming every low expectation his mother had of him, sent a different kind of chill through him. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Reluctantly, Ethan set down the phone and opened the door to find Sarah standing on his porch, holding a steaming mug and a thick woolen blanket. "May I come in?" she asked. Without waiting for an answer, she stepped inside, taking in Ethan's huddled form with a practiced eye. "Hypothermia's nothing to mess with. Drink this, ginger tea with honey. The blanket's wool from our neighbor's sheep." Ethan accepted both, wrapping the impossibly soft blanket around his shoulders and cradling the mug in his still cold hands. "How did you know?" he asked. "Jack called from the fields, said you looked like you were at your breaking point." Sarah sat beside him on the bed. "Everyone has one, you know. A moment when they seriously consider giving up." "Did you?" "When you were learning to farm." Sarah smiled, the expression softening her usually composed features. "Many. The worst was during our first winter here, when a power outage nearly destroyed all our greenhouse seedlings. David was away at a conference. I stood in our kitchen staring at the phone for an hour, trying to decide whether to call my department chair and beg for my old position back." "What stopped you?" Ethan asked, sipping the tea and feeling its warmth spread through his chest. "Not what, who?" Sarah's gaze was steady. "I decided I'd rather fail doing something that aligned with my values than succeed at something that didn't fully engage my spirit. But more importantly, I realized I hadn't yet given myself a fair chance to succeed. The struggle was real, but it was too soon to determine the outcome." The parallel to Ethan's current situation was unmistakable. Sarah wasn't just sharing a story. She was offering perspective that cut through his misery with uncomfortable precision. "What if I'm just not suited for this kind of work?" Ethan asked, voicing his deepest fear. "What if I'm exactly what my mother thinks, a spoiled tech brat with no real substance or capability?" "That's certainly the easier belief," Sarah acknowledged. "Failure due to inherent inability requires no further effort. It's a comfortable excuse to stop trying." Her bluntness stung. "That's not fair, isn't it? You've spent 2 weeks doing work you've never done before, using muscles you've never developed, applying knowledge you've never acquired. Of course, you're struggling. The question isn't whether you're suited for this work. It's whether you're willing to push through the struggle long enough to find out what you're actually capable of." Sarah stood, moving toward the door. "Keep the blanket. As long as you need it. The worst of the cold should pass by morning." As the door closed behind her, Ethan looked down at the flip phone still lying on his bed. After a long moment, he picked it up. Not to call his mother, but to set it on the nightstand, out of immediate reach. He wasn't ready to quit. Not yet. Not before he'd given himself a fair chance to discover what might lie beyond the struggle. The third week at Oak Ridge Farm marked a subtle shift in Ethan's experience. His body, though still sore at the end of each day, had begun to adapt to the physical demands. Blisters hardened into calluses, muscles strengthened, and movements that had once felt awkward became more natural. His mind, too, was adjusting, learning to identify plants he'd never noticed before, remembering the proper techniques for various tasks, beginning to anticipate the rhythm of farm operations. He was far from proficient, but he was no longer entirely helpless either. This small progress brought an unexpected sense of pride that both confused and intrigued him. Monday morning, Ethan reported to the greenhouse complex where he found Emma checking seedling trays with meticulous attention. "You're with me today," Emma informed him, making a note on her tablet. "We're inspecting the Heritage Seed project." "Heritage Seed?" Ethan asked, pulling on the work gloves that had become as essential as his phone once was in San Francisco. "Oak Ridge Farm maintains a seed bank of rare and endangered crop varieties," Emma explained, leading Ethan to a separate section of the greenhouse. "These tomato varieties, for instance, date back to the 1800s. They're not commercially viable for industrial farming because they don't ship well or have inconsistent sizing, but their flavor and genetic diversity are irreplaceable." The seedlings looked no different to Ethan's untrained eye than the regular tomato plants he'd worked with earlier, but Emma pointed out subtle distinctions in leaf pattern and fruit development. As they worked side by side, carefully examining the young plants for signs of disease or deficiency, Emma explained the science behind the seed preservation program with a passion that reminded Ethan of tech entrepreneurs pitching innovative startups. "The goal isn't just maintaining biodiversity," Emma emphasized, her hands never pausing in their precise movements. "It's preserving agricultural heritage and genetic traits that might be crucial for adapting to changing climate conditions. These old varieties often have natural resistance to stresses that modern hybrids have lost." "I didn't realize farming was so forward-thinking," Ethan admitted. "I pictured it as more traditional, unchanged for generations." Emma laughed. "Good farming has always been innovative. My grandfather, who expanded this place, was constantly experimenting with new techniques and varieties. The methods change, but the mindset of continuous improvement remains the same." By lunchtime, they had inspected dozens of seedlings, each carefully documented in Emma's detailed database. Ethan's hands moved with growing confidence, his earlier clumsiness giving way to a more assured touch as he remembered Anna's advice about treating plants as living things deserving of care. "Not bad," Emma commented as they cleaned the workstation. "You've developed a decent eye for spotting nutrient deficiencies." Coming from Emma, who Ethan had learned was notoriously exacting, this constituted high praise. He felt a disproportionate glow of satisfaction at the simple acknowledgement of his improvement. "This Heritage Seed program?" Ethan asked as they walked toward the dining hall. "How do you fund it? It seems like mostly a conservation effort without immediate commercial payoff." "Grants, donations, some specialty market sales. We sell to chefs who appreciate the unique qualities." Emma glanced at him curiously. "Why?" "Just wondering about the business model," Ethan replied, his mind running calculations, a habit from his business education that had lain dormant during his weeks of physical labor. "Seems like there would be significant maintenance costs with delayed or indirect returns." "The ROI isn't always financial," Emma replied, "though these heritage varieties often command premium prices from the right buyers who understand their value." Throughout lunch, Ethan found himself thinking about the greenhouse project, analyzing it from perspectives his business training had equipped him to consider: market potential, scalability, funding structures. For the first time since arriving at Oak Ridge Farm, he felt on somewhat familiar ground, his education and experience lending him insights that might actually be valuable here. The afternoon brought an unexpected turn. With a lull in the day's scheduled tasks, Ethan found himself drawn to the old barn he'd noticed at the northern edge of the property. No one had mentioned it in his orientation or assignments, yet its weathered timber frame and unusual cupola suggested historical significance. Curious, he made his way across the northern fields, where cover crops grew in neat rows, and approached the structure. Unlike the other farm buildings, which blended traditional design with modern functionality, this barn appeared to be preserved in its original state. Hand-hewn beams, wrought iron hardware, and a stone foundation that spoke of craftsmanship from another era. The massive wooden doors stood partially open, revealing a dim interior. Ethan hesitated, uncertain if he was crossing some unspoken boundary, but his curiosity overcame his hesitation. He stepped inside. It took a moment for his eyes to adjust to the low light filtering through dusty windows. When they did, what he saw stopped him in his tracks. The barn's interior had been transformed into an agricultural museum of sorts. Antique tools hung on the walls with descriptive placards. Glass cases displayed seed packets and farm records, dating back to the 1800s. Faded photographs showed generations of Thornfields working the same land where Ethan now stood. But what drew his immediate attention was the collection of vintage farm machinery that occupied the central space. Tractors, harvesters, and implements that traced the evolution of agricultural technology through the decades. Each piece had been meticulously restored, gleaming with polish and care. "Impressive, isn't it?" a voice said from behind him. Ethan turned to find Jack standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the afternoon light. "I wasn't sure if I was allowed in here," Ethan said, suddenly feeling like an intruder. "It's not off limits," Jack replied, walking toward him. "We just don't include it in the regular farm tour. It's more of a personal project." "Yours?" "My father's originally. I've continued it since he passed 5 years ago." Jack ran a hand along the fender of a 1940s tractor, his touch reverent. He believed we couldn't move forward without understanding where we'd been. Each of these machines represented a technological breakthrough in its time, innovations that changed how people farmed, what they could produce, how many they could feed. Ethan moved closer to examine a strange contraption with multiple gears and levers. "What's this one?" "Seed drill from 1920, Jack explained, his voice warming with enthusiasm. "Before this, planting was done by broadcasting seeds by hand. Inefficient, wasteful. This allowed precise spacing, consistent depth. Crop yields increased dramatically." As Jack guided him through the collection, explaining each piece and its historical significance, Ethan found himself genuinely fascinated. The machines weren't just antiques. They were chapters in a story of human ingenuity responding to necessity, of technological evolution driven by practical needs. "These weren't just tools," Jack explained, gesturing to the assembled collection. "They were transformations, each one representing a moment when someone looked at an agricultural challenge and thought, there must be a better way." Ethan paused before a wall of photographs, men and women in outdated clothing, standing proudly beside their fields and equipment. Their faces, though from another time, showed the same mixture of determination, pride, and connection to the land that he'd observed in the current Oak Ridge workers. "It's a kind of technology most people never think about," Ethan mused, the realization dawning on him. "In San Francisco, we act like innovation began with the computer chip, but there's been agricultural tech development for centuries." Jackie nodded, pleased by Ethan's understanding. "Every generation faces its challenges and creates solutions. My great-grandfather's challenge was drought. My grandfather's was soil depletion. My father's was economic viability in a globalized market." "And yours?" Ethan asked. "Climate adaptation and sustainability. Finding ways to produce food that works with natural systems instead of against them. Using technology where it helps, tradition where it matters." As they moved through the museum, Jack's knowledge and passion for agricultural history were infectious. Ethan found himself asking questions, drawing connections, seeing patterns in how problems and solutions had evolved over time. Near the back of the barn, A modern workbench stood in stark contrast to the historical exhibits. Tools were arranged precisely, and partially restored equipment components sat in various stages of completion. "This is your workshop?" Ethan asked. "Where I restore the pieces we find," Jack confirmed. "Sometimes local farms donate old equipment when they modernize. Other times we find things at auctions or estate sales." Ethan examined the current project. A complex gear mechanism partially disassembled on the bench, its components laid out in careful order. "The timing gear from a 1930s thresher," Jack explained. "Nearly impossible to find replacement parts. For these, I'm having to fabricate some components from scratch." "You're machining replacement parts?" Ethan asked, impressed. "When necessary. I studied mechanical engineering before coming back to the farm. These old machines have a logic to them that modern equipment often lacks. They were designed to be repaired by the farmers themselves, with limited tools and resources." Something clicked in Ethan's mind. That's what's missing from modern tech. We design for obsolescence, not repairability. When your smartphone breaks, you're expected to buy a new one, not fix the old one. Jack looked at him with new interest. Exactly. The relationship between user and tool has fundamentally changed. We've lost the culture of maintenance and repair. As the afternoon light began to fade, Ethan found himself still in the barn, engaged in a conversation that bridged their seemingly separate worlds, Jack's agricultural heritage and his own tech background. They discussed how digital technologies might support sustainable farming, how ancient agricultural wisdom might inform modern innovation, how the problems of food production and distribution intersected with the challenges of information systems. For the first time since arriving at Oak Ridge Farm, Ethan felt not just competent, but valuable, able to contribute insights from his own education and experience that complemented rather than conflicted with the farm's mission. When they finally emerged from the barn, the setting sun cast long shadows across the fields. Jack locked the large doors behind them with an old iron key. "Feel free to come back," he told Ethan. "There's a lot more to see, and if you're interested, I could use a hand with some of the restoration work." The invitation, casually offered but genuinely meant, affected Ethan deeply. It wasn't based on his name or connections or even obedience to farm rules. It was based on shared interest and the promise of mutual benefit. Jack's knowledge of machinery and history complemented by Ethan's fresh perspective. As they walked back toward the main complex, Ethan found himself seeing Oak Ridge Farm with new eyes. What had initially appeared as a primitive exile from technological civilization now revealed itself as something far more complex. A living laboratory where past and future, tradition and innovation, natural systems and human ingenuity interacted in dynamic balance. And somewhere in that realization, a seed of possibility took root, a glimpse of how his own skills and knowledge might find meaningful application in this unexpected context. The discovery in the barn hadn't just revealed a collection of antique machinery. It had uncovered potential connections between the separate worlds he had always believed could never intersect. The discovery in the barn became a turning point in Ethan's time at Oak Ridge Farm. Over the following days, he found himself drawn back to the Agricultural Museum whenever he had free moments, sometimes to help Jack with restoration projects, other times simply to study the evolution of farm technology chronicled in the weathered implements and vintage machinery. As October gave way to November, the farm's rhythm shifted to reflect the changing season. Fields were prepared for winter, the last harvests were completed, and focus turned to maintenance, planning, and specialized indoor projects. Ethan's rotation assignments changed accordingly, introducing him to aspects of agricultural work he hadn't yet experienced. One cold morning, after a particularly grueling session of fence repair in near-freezing temperatures, Jack approached Ethan with an unexpected proposal. "I could use your help with something," he said, his breath forming clouds in the crisp air. A more technical project than usual. Ethan's interest was immediately piqued. After nearly a month at Oak Ridge, he had grown accustomed to physical labor, but still craved intellectual challenges that engaged his technical mind. "What kind of project?" he asked, pulling off his work gloves. "Come see," Jack replied, leading the way toward the farm's modest administrative building, a structure Ethan had rarely entered since his arrival. Inside, Jack guided him to a room that looked strikingly out of place on a farm, a small but well-equipped technology center with several computer workstations, a server rack, and various monitoring devices. "Most people don't realize how much data management modern farming requires," Jack explained, noting Ethan's surprise. "We track everything: soil conditions, weather patterns, crop yields, resource usage, market prices." He gestured to one of the screens displaying a complex dashboard of farm metrics. "This system helps us make evidence-based decisions rather than relying solely on tradition or intuition." Ethan moved closer, examining the interface with professional interest. "You built this?" "Cobbled it together over the years," Jack admitted. "I'm no software engineer, but I know what information we need. The problem is it's become increasingly clunky as we've added more data streams. That's where I thought you might have some insights." For the next hour, Jack walked Ethan through Oak Ridge's digital infrastructure, a patchwork of custom applications, spreadsheets, and third-party software that managed everything from irrigation scheduling to financial projections. The system worked but lacked the integration and efficiency that Ethan knew was possible with modern development approaches. "You essentially need a unified farm management platform," Ethan observed, his mind already sketching architectural solutions. "Something that integrates all these separate functions into a coherent system with a consistent user interface." Jack nodded. "Exactly. There are commercial products available, but none that quite fit our specific combination of needs, and they're prohibitively expensive for an operation our size." "I could help with this," Ethan said, feeling a surge of confidence in offering skills he knew were valuable. "This is actually my wheelhouse: platform integration, user experience design, data visualization. These are things I understand." "That's what I was hoping," Jack replied with a small smile. "Sarah thought I was crazy to ask the city tech kid to help with our digital systems, but I had a hunch you might find this interesting." "More than interesting," Ethan admitted, already scrolling through code on one of the monitors. "This is the first thing I've seen here that I might actually be good at from day one." Over the following weeks, a new routine emerged. Ethan still participated in the regular farm work rotations, his body continuing to strengthen and his agricultural knowledge expanding. But his afternoons were now dedicated to what became known as the Oak Ridge Digital Integration Project. Working closely with Jack and occasionally Emma, who managed much of the farm's research data, Ethan applied his technical expertise to create a cohesive system that would streamline the farm's operations. He designed a modular architecture that could grow with the farm's needs, crafted intuitive interfaces that even the least tech-savvy workers could navigate, and built data visualization tools that revealed patterns and correlations previously hidden in spreadsheets. The work engaged him completely, challenging his skills while connecting them to tangible outcomes he could see and touch. When he refined the irrigation management module, he could walk through the fields and observe the actual water flowing more efficiently through the systems he had helped optimize. When he improved the harvest tracking database, he could watch workers using tablets to log information that would inform next season's planting decisions. For the first time in his life, Ethan experienced the profound satisfaction of creating Technology that directly served real human needs in a physical context he understood and valued. There were no abstract metrics of success, no vanity metrics to manipulate, no artificial growth targets to chase, just the clear evidence of work made easier and decisions better informed. One evening, as Ethan and Jack reviewed the latest system improvements in the tech room, Sarah appeared in the doorway, observing them with quiet interest. "How's the digital revolution coming along?" she asked, entering the room. "Ethan's rebuilt our inventory management module," Jack replied, gesturing to the screen. "It's now integrated with our planting schedule and market projections. We can see potential supply gaps months in advance." Sarah studied the display, her expression thoughtful. "This could change our contract negotiation position with restaurants. If we can predict our harvests with greater accuracy, we can commit to supply agreements with more confidence." "That's exactly the point," Ethan agreed eagerly. "Better data flows mean better decision-making across all aspects of the operation." Sarah turned to him, her shrewd eyes assessing. "You seem different when you talk about this work. More present." The observation caught Ethan off guard. "It's work I understand," he said after a moment, "where my skills actually matter." "All work matters here," Sarah corrected gently. "But finding the intersection of ability and purpose, that's where people thrive." As November progressed, word of Ethan's technical contributions spread throughout the farm. Workers who had initially viewed him with skepticism now sought him out with questions or suggestions for the new system. His role had evolved from reluctant laborer to valued contributor, bringing a perspective and skill set that complemented the agricultural expertise surrounding him. The transformation wasn't just professional. Ethan found himself changing in subtle, fundamental ways. His reflexive sarcasm gave way to more thoughtful communication. His formerly constant need for external validation diminished as he found satisfaction in work well done. His relationship with time shifted from viewing it as something to be filled or killed to recognizing it as a resource to be invested thoughtfully. Even his physical appearance reflected the inner changes. The designer stubble was replaced by a short beard he maintained for practicality rather than style. His hands, once soft and manicured, now bore the marks of both physical labor and long coding sessions. His posture had changed too, the carefully cultivated casual slouch replaced by the balanced stance of someone accustomed to actual work. One particularly cold morning, Ethan woke before his alarm, a habit he had developed over his weeks at the farm. He stepped outside to watch the sunrise, a daily ritual that had somehow become essential to his sense of well-being. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, painting the frost-covered fields in subtle gradients of blue and silver. As he stood there, breath-forming clouds in the frigid air, he realized with sudden clarity that he hadn't checked social media or thought about his followers or worried about his public image in weeks. The concerns that had once dominated his consciousness now seemed strangely distant and unimportant compared to the immediate reality of the farm, the community he had become part of, and the work that engaged both his mind and body. His phone chimed in his pocket, not his useless smartphone, but the basic flip phone that had become his primary communication device. It was a text from his mother. "Planning Portland visit next week. Time to check on your progress. Lunch Thursday." Ethan stared at the message, conflicting emotions swirling through him. 2 months ago, he would have been furious at his mother's presumption, or perhaps eagerly anticipating the opportunity to demonstrate how miserable he was. Now he felt something more complex, a strange mixture of pride in what he had accomplished and uncertainty about how his mother would perceive the changes in him. "Fine," he texted back simply. "Let me know when." The day of Olivia Sinclair's Visit dawned clear and cold, frost glittering on the fields under the winter sun. Ethan had been assigned to the tech room that day, finalizing documentation for the farm management system he had developed. He spotted his mother's sleek luxury. The moment it pulled into the parking area, impossible to miss among the practical vehicles of regular farm visitors. Olivia emerged looking simultaneously in and out of place, her casual attire clearly chosen for a farm visit, but still bearing the unmistakable quality and tailoring that set it apart. For a moment, Ethan viewed his mother through new eyes, not as the domineering CEO who had exiled him, but as a woman who had built something meaningful from nothing, who had made difficult choices that shaped her path, just as he was now making his. "Ethan?" she greeted him, scanning his appearance with barely concealed surprise. The designer clothes and perfect styling were gone, replaced by practical jeans, work boots, and an Oak Ridge farm shirt with the logo embroidered above the pocket, a gift from the team after he had helped restore a damaged irrigation system during an unexpected freeze. "Mom," he replied, suddenly self-conscious about his work-roughened hands and beard, "welcome to Oak Ridge." "You look—" She seemed to search for the right word. "Well," he confirmed, and meant it in ways that extended beyond physical health. "Would you like a tour?" For the next hour, Ethan guided his mother through the property, explaining operations with a knowledge and enthusiasm that clearly surprised her. He showed her the fields now prepared for winter, the greenhouse with its research projects, the storage facilities where harvested crops were carefully maintained, and the educational spaces used for community programs. The Heritage Seed Preservation program has particular potential for expansion, he found himself explaining as they walked. With the right technological infrastructure to track genetic traits and growing performance, the research value could attract significant grant funding, while preserving agricultural biodiversity. Olivia listened with growing interest, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed her quick grasp of both the agricultural concepts and their business implications. "You've given this considerable thought," she observed. "I have," Ethan acknowledged. "There's untapped potential here for scaling impact while maintaining sustainable operations." They found Sarah in the main office, reviewing seed orders for the coming season. The two women greeted each other with the warmth of old friends who had chosen different paths but maintained mutual respect. "Your son has become quite an asset," Sarah told Olivia with characteristic directness. "Quick learner, excellent problem solver, surprisingly adaptable when challenged." "Is that so?" Olivia's gaze shifted to Ethan, something like genuine pride flickering across her features. "He's revolutionized our data management systems," Sarah continued, "and he's brought valuable insights to our heritage seed preservation project." The praise, delivered matter-of-factly rather than as performance for his mother's benefit, warmed Ethan unexpectedly. It represented a true evaluation of his contributions, not the hollow compliments he'd received throughout his life, simply for being Olivia Sinclair's son. Sarah excused herself for a scheduled meeting, leaving mother and son to continue their tour. As they approached the old barn that had become so significant to Ethan, he hesitated. "There's something I'd like to show you," he said, leading his mother toward the weathered structure. "Something that changed my perspective." Inside the agricultural museum, Ethan guided his mother through the collection, explaining each piece and its historical significance, just as Jack had done for him. As they moved among the antique machinery, Ethan shared the insights he had gained about the parallels between agricultural innovation and modern technology development. "These weren't just tools," he explained, echoing Jack's words. "They were transformations, each one representing a moment when someone identified a need and created a solution that changed how people worked and lived." Olivia listened with uncharacteristic silence, her expression thoughtful as she absorbed her son's evident passion for a subject she would never have imagined capturing his interest. "This is Jack's project?" she asked finally. "Started by..." His father continued by him. "It's where I first began to see the connections between their world and ours. How technology has always been about solving real problems, not just creating novelty or convenience." Near the back of the barn, Ethan showed his mother the workbench, where he had spent many evenings helping Jack restore vintage equipment, learning the mechanical principles that underpinned modern machinery. "Jack's taught me how these systems work," Ethan explained, handling a restored governor mechanism with careful respect. "Not just the technical aspects, but the human considerations, how tools shape the way people work, how innovations succeed or fail based on their relationship to actual human needs." "And you've found this fulfilling?" Olivia asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. "More than anything I've done before," Ethan admitted. "It connects abstract knowledge to tangible outcomes in a way that feels meaningful." As they left the barn, Ethan guided his mother toward the tech room, eager to show her the digital systems he had developed. The transformation of the modest farm office into a functional technology center clearly impressed Olivia, who recognized professional quality work when she saw it. "You built this?" she asked, examining the interface of the farm management platform displayed on the main monitor. "Designed it, integrated the components, customized it for their specific needs," Ethan explained, unable to keep the pride from his voice as he demonstrated the system's capabilities. "It's not bleeding-edge tech, but it solves real problems they were facing with data management and operational planning." "It's elegant," Olivia observed, and coming from her, a woman who had built a tech empire based on intuitive design and seamless functionality, the simple compliment carried enormous weight. After the tour, they settled in the farm's small cafe, where Emma had prepared coffee and freshly baked apple pastries made with Oak Ridge's own heritage variety apples. The conversation flowed easily between agricultural practices, technology applications, and market trends, topics that would have bored Ethan to tears months earlier, but now engaged him fully. Left alone at last, mother and son faced a moment of awkwardness. They had navigated the tour and professional conversations smoothly, but this was their first private moment to address what had happened, both his initial rebellion and his subsequent transformation. "You seem different," Olivia finally said, studying him over her coffee cup. "I am different," Ethan confirmed. "This place changes people." "How so?" He considered the question carefully. "It grounds you in reality. When you're troubleshooting a broken irrigation system in freezing weather, it doesn't matter who your mother is, or what you're wearing, or how many Instagram followers you have. What matters is whether you can actually solve the problem." Olivia nodded slowly. "And you discovered you could?" "Not at first," Ethan admitted with a small laugh. "I was terrible at everything, completely useless. But eventually, yes, I found I could contribute in ways I never expected." "Sarah speaks highly of you," Olivia observed. "That's not a compliment she gives lightly." "I know." Ethan found himself wanting his mother to understand the depth of what had occurred here, not just learning farm skills or building a software system, but a fundamental shift in how he perceived himself and his place in the world. "Mom, I need to tell you something. I'm not coming back to San Francisco when the 3 months are up. Not immediately, anyway." Olivia's eyebrows rose. "Is this rebellion again?" "No," he replied firmly. "It's the opposite, actually. It's taking responsibility. I've started working with Jack and Sarah on a digital transformation initiative for the farm's operations. We're developing a system that could potentially be adapted for other small to mid-sized sustainable farms facing similar challenges. I want to see it through." And your life in San Francisco, your friends, your social circle? Ethan looked out the window where workers were preparing a greenhouse for winter seeding, their movements purposeful and productive. That life feels hollow now. The endless parties, the status games, the constant performance for social media. Here I'm building something real, something that matters. Olivia was silent for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then to his surprise, she smiled. A genuine smile that reached her eyes in a way he hadn't seen since childhood. "Your father would be proud," she said quietly. "He always worried that the wealth would isolate you from developing your own purpose. He wanted more for you than just being a Sinclair." The mention of his father, coupled with the unexpected approval, brought sudden tears to Ethan's eyes. "I barely remember what he was like anymore," he admitted. "Just fragments." "He was brilliant, intuitive, deeply principled," Olivia replied, her voice softening with memory. "Much like Jack, actually. They're both men who see beyond surface value to the deeper worth of things and people." "Jack told me I remind him of my father sometimes," Ethan said, "when I get excited about solving a problem." Olivia nodded. "James had that same intensity of focus. He could spend hours working on a single coding challenge, completely absorbed. It's what made him such an extraordinary engineer, not just talent, but sustained attention to what mattered." This glimpse into his father's character, the comparison to qualities Ethan was just beginning to develop in himself, created a bridge between them that wealth and shared DNA never had. For perhaps the first time, he saw his mother as a whole person rather than simply an authority figure to either please or rebel against. "It's not too late, you know," he suggested gently, "to build technology that solves real problems instead of just generating engagement metrics." "Perhaps not," she agreed, studying him with newfound respect. "So this farm in Oregon, is it a temporary chapter or a new direction?" "I'm not sure yet," Ethan answered honestly, "but I know I need to see where it leads. There's something here I need to explore fully, not just at Oak Ridge specifically, but in this way of connecting what I create with what actually matters in the world." Olivia set down her coffee cup with decisive finality. "Then I'll support that exploration, however it unfolds." "You're not disappointed that I'm not returning to Sinclair Innovations, not following the path you laid out?" "Ethan," his mother said with unexpected warmth, 3 months ago, you were sabotaging product launches out of spite and treating your responsibilities like optional inconveniences. Now you're talking about digital transformation strategies for sustainable agriculture and seeing projects through to completion." She smiled again. "That's not disappointing. That's growth. The direction matters less than the development." As the winter sun cast long shadows across the fields of Oak Ridge Farm, mother and son sat together in a companionable silence that contained more genuine connection than all their years of living under the same roof in San Francisco. Something fundamental had shifted, not just in Ethan, but in how they related to each other as adults, with separate but equally valid purposes. Later, after his mother had departed with promises to discuss potential partnerships between Sinclair Innovations and Oak Ridge Farm on her next visit, Ethan walked alone through the quiet fields, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. The bare trees and dormant earth seemed to hold a promise of renewal that resonated with his own internal transformation. His hands, once soft and manicured, now bore the marks of honest labor and focused creation. His mind, once occupied with social status and appearances, now buzzed with ideas for meaningful projects and sustainable systems. The transformation wasn't just about trading designer clothes for work boots or penthouses for cabins. It was about discovering a version of himself he'd never known existed. Someone capable, resilient, and purposeful. Someone who could create value through his own efforts, rather than merely consuming what his privilege provided. As evening settled over the farm, Jack approached, tablet in hand. "System diagnostics for the greenhouse monitoring setup," he explained. "Thought you might want to review them before tomorrow's installation." "I'd like that," Ethan replied, falling into step beside him as they headed toward the tech room. "So," Jack ventured, "your mother's visit went well?" "Surprisingly, yes." Ethan smiled at Jack's obvious curiosity. "Turns out people can change, even tech moguls and their spoiled sons." "I never thought you were spoiled," Jack remarked casually. "Misplaced, maybe, like a cutting from the wrong environment suddenly planted in new soil." He considered Ethan, for a moment his expression softening. "Now you're putting down roots. Turns out you're hardier than anyone knew, yourself included." As they walked together toward the warm light of the main building, Ethan reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought him to this moment. His mother had sent him to Oak Ridge Farm as punishment, expecting him to learn harsh lessons about privilege and consequence. Instead, he had discovered something far more valuable, his own capacity for growth, adaptation, and meaningful contribution. What began as exile had become opportunity. What seemed like punishment had revealed purpose. And what had been hidden in the old barn, the connection between past and future, between practical needs and innovative solutions, between individual effort and community benefit, had changed everything. The tech mogul's son, who had arrived at Oak Ridge Farm in designer boots and resentment, had indeed been transformed. But unlike the carefully curated transformations of his previous life, new hairstyles, wardrobes, or social circles, this change had occurred at the level of identity itself, reshaping not just how he appeared to others, but who he understood himself to be. And that, Ethan reflected as he entered the tech room, ready to apply his skills to problems that actually mattered, was the most meaningful change of all. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.